You guys are back in the old school. Hey guys, I'm the Retro Reject, and of course, today we are going to be taking a look at Thomas and the Magic Railroad. And sorry that I wasn't able to upload the movie review like I did, like I promised during last week. It's just, I ran into the same problems as I do with any one of these movie reviews. But we are going to be taking a good look at this movie, as since it's pretty obvious that Thomas the Tank Engine is one of my cherished childhood heroes. And this movie definitely falls into that category of the movies I've watched as a kid, and I just remember loving it. Although, it is kind of funny because I couldn't watch it as often because the DVD I owned was just so scratched that you could barely watch the movie, and only a few little segments of it really stick out in my head. Although, it is a rather odd choice for me to be reviewing this movie, because not a lot of people will tend to rewatch things based around, like, these toddler/kiddie shows, and a lot of people will put Thomas the Tank Engine in that kind of category. But Thomas the Tank Engine is not just a kiddie show, as I've explained before. It's a very timeless kind of series, and seeing the model trains for the first time ever on the big screen, is just flat out amazing to me. So, we're going to be taking a look at this movie and seeing if it falls into the category with it being timeless with the rest of the model train series, or I'm just letting my childhood nostalgia blind me. So, without any further ado, let's get on into it! So the movie begins with a rather bland, but still somewhat magical title screen, and then we're introduced to our main narrator, who is Alec Baldwin, and he introduces himself as Mr. Conductor, and then introduces us to Thomas the Tank Engine and his friends.
5, 6, 7, 8...
Who do we appreciate? Practicing your numbers, Gordon. That's a good engine.
I'm counting how many seconds late you are. What does that sign say?
Sodor Railway. Really reliable and right on time.
Now, this little dialogue scene that's happening between Thomas and Gordon may seem like nothing, but until you realize that in the Thomas the Tank Engine TV show, it was always, the voices of each character was given to by one narrator. So, watching this movie and finally being able to see that each character has their own individualized voice, it's mind-blowing to you. And in this movie, I think each character was pretty well cast with the voice that was given to them. Although there are a few of them that I have some issues with, but we'll get into that later. So Thomas explains to Gordon that he's going to be off picking up Mr. Conductor because he's going to be looking after them while Sir Topham Hatt is away on vacation. But Gordon thinks that they don't need any help or need to be looked after until he's proven wrong when the main antagonist of this movie shows up.
Get out of my way! I have unfinished business here, and I want to finish it fast! The Diesel 10's back!
This is our main antagonist of the film, Diesel 10, and the reason why he's called that is because he's 10 out of the 10 of the worst diesels for devious deeds, and just any other evil thing you can think of. We then fade away into the real world, to a place called Shining Time Station. And if you didn't know, this is actually a really cool Easter egg because back in the day, Thomas the Tank Engine episodes were played on this channel called Shining Time Station. And it was basically just the segue to introduce each story, because we're first introduced to the Shining Time Station and something is going on around there. And then this character called Mr. Conductor shows up and tells the story of a Thomas the Tank Engine episode. And it's kind of funny because each narrator of Thomas the Tank Engine played this character. I mean, first it was the first UK narrator, Ringo Starr, yes, the drummer for the Beatles, and then it was played by George Carlin.
We are then introduced to a kid named Patch and his dog Mud, as they're looking at a map.
And then another character named Billy shows up in which they start talking about how on this map that they're looking at, there are lines that indicate that there are railroad tracks, but they're not there in real life.
And through their dialogue, we learn that Patch is working for a guy named Burnett Stone,
who has an engine in his little workshop, and keep her in mind because she's going to become a very important part of this movie later on. Meanwhile, Diesel 10 is talking with his two henchmen named Splatter and Dodge, but he just calls them Splodge just to shorten both of their names together. And he's telling them his whole plan of he wants to destroy the engine we saw earlier in Burnett Stone's workshop, so he could destroy Steamies once and for all. I don't know how that works by just destroying one engine, but okay. So Billy goes back to Shining Time Station, in which we are finally introduced to Mr. Conductor, who is played by Alec Baldwin. And just take a minute to appreciate Alec's acting in this scene.
Important day, Mr. C?
It is a very important day. I'm going to the island of Sodor. You know, it's the only place in my universe where I really fit in size-wise.
Granted, this is not Alec's best acting he's ever done, but he is just so entertaining throughout this entire movie, and I have to give him the utmost respect for having to deal with being put into these dumb kids' movies nowadays, and just trying to make the best of what he's given. Because you barely see this guy put in serious roles after this movie came out. I mean, the last serious role I've seen him in was Mission Impossible Fallout, and he was a very minor character in that movie.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Oh, well, thank you, Moby Dick. I like my sparkle, too. You know, gold really is your color.
Do you guys think that this is just a form of foreshadowing for Alec that he's going to be cast in that dumb live-action Cat in the Hat movie? Now, for some reason, Mutt has this feeling that something is going to go terribly wrong, because, I mean, animals be smart, man. So he goes to Mr. Conductor and tries to convince him in his best dog ways to make him stay, but unfortunately he's unsuccessful.
Mutt? Goodbye, Mutt. Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle.
You know, I would probably do something really clever to make fun of this dumb line, but Nostalgia Critic already did something, and nothing can top what he did. And what do you want me to do? I mean, it's a dumb line read. So, meanwhile, back on the island of Sodor, before Thomas goes to pick up Mr. Conductor, he goes to talk with James, and this is where I say that not every Train character in this movie is well cast with a voice.
Botheration!
You weren't concentrating, Thomas. Lucky for you that the buffers were there.
That's what buffers are for, to stop engines from crashing. What are you doing in the sheds, James?
I'm feeling a little blue, which isn't so hot when you're red.
That is not what I imagine James sounding like. I imagine him sounding more like this.
Botheration!
You weren't concentrating, Thomas. Lucky for you that the buffers were there.
That's what buffers are for, to stop engines from crashing. What are you doing in the sheds, James?
I'm feeling a little blue, which isn't so hot when you're red.
But Diesel 10 shows up and explains to them that there's nothing they can do to stop him in usual kid movie villain ways. So Mr. Conductor is able to teleport himself to the island of Sodor, and by some coincidence, he ends up in a spot where Thomas just so happens to be coming down the line as he's on his way to go pick him up.
I have to see Sir Topham Hatt to get my orders right away. The journey from Shining Time keeps getting bumpier and bumpier.
Does it?
So once again, meanwhile, back in the real world, we meet up with another one of our main characters named Lily, who she's preparing to go visit her grandpa, who is Burnett Stone.
You're coming with me to Grandpa's, Bluebird. I know how much you like to travel.
You know, I would say that this actress, Mara Wilson, does not look the age of where she would just be carrying around a plush toy with her. That seems pretty weird to me. But then yet again, that's coming from the guy who bases his YouTube channel around a dinosaur, a robot, a Psycho Ranger, and has not one, not two, but 3 plush toys of Nala. Okay, here's another thing you should get used to in this movie. We flip-flop back and forth between the real human world and the Thomas the Tank Engine world constantly in this movie, because we meet back up with Thomas and his friends who are at Tidmouth Sheds as they're talking about how Diesel's plan of wanting to destroy this magical engine, and they're all wanting to agree to going out and finding her.
What engine? What legend?
Of an engine whose magic makes her more powerful than Diesel will ever be. That's why he wants to find her.
Then we'd better find her first.
Yeah, Percy is another one of those characters where I don't think he was properly well cast, because I imagine him more sounding like this.
Percy, you protect those buffers from Diesel,
What?
and I'll find Mr. Conductor.
Me? Why me?
'Cause you're a brave engine, Percy.
Oh, I forgot.
Now, Mr. Conductor is in Sir Topham Hatt's office, and he's reading a letter that was left to him, and it's rather odd that in this movie we don't see Sir Topham Hatt at all when he was like a really main character in the TV show. But anyway, he receives his orders, and he's waiting for a phone call from Sir Topham Hatt. This whole scene basically consists of Mr. Conductor trying on Sir Topham Hatt's hat that he left behind for some reason, and then this poster on the wall, which has Sir Topham Hatt's body on it, starts making faces at Mr. Conductor, basically being not amused with what Mr. Conductor is doing, which for some reason kind of reminds me of. Which for some reason the poster really reminds me of a combination of Uncle Sam and Big Brother is Watching You. Until eventually Sir Topham Hatt finally calls Mr. Conductor. Okay, here's another thing I noticed. Do you think that Alec had an actual script in these kind of scenes? Because to me, it almost seems like he's just trying to pad out the runtime, and he was given no direction on what to do in these scenes. It just seems like the directors were like, okay, do whatever you want in this scene, just try to make it funny, right? Because we're trying to get people to enjoy this so far pretty boring and confusing movie so far. We then cut away to nighttime, in which all the engines are asleep, and Mr. Conductor is having a little bit of trouble falling asleep, and we just get more of a scene of Alec just trying to pad out the runtime by just doing random things to keep this movie entertaining.
I'd like to have a nice cup of hot cocoa. Would you fellas care to join me? No? What would you rather do instead? Go outside and play? Well, I can understand that. What do you think? Why do you keep hitting him like that? You're gonna have a timeout.
But Diesel 10 sneaks up on all the engines and starts wrecking Tidmouth Sheds. And of course he's looking for this lost engine, and as well as wanting to get rid of Mr. Conductor, and he tries to escape, but he's run out of his gold dust.
You're not clever enough to stop me.
Oh, yes, I am.
No, you're not. What is that?
That's right, it's sugar, Diesel. And if I throw this in your tank, it'll seize you up for good.
So after Diesel 10 leaves, everybody is obviously a little shooken up from seeing him, and they've too noticed that Mr. Conductor has run out of his gold dust. But he's able to calm everybody down, and everybody just goes back to sleep. And oh no, I smell a nightmare sequence.
What's going wrong with our railroad and why? My universe is in danger. I've got to find more gold dust.
So once again, we go back into the real world as we meet back up with Lily as she's on her way to get on a train to Muffle Mountain, which is where her grandpa lives. But for some reason, the dog is there, and he leads her onto the wrong train, thinking that she can help out at Shining Time Station. I mean, there's some points in this movie where the dog makes good decisions, but then there's other times where I don't even know what he was thinking, because what did he expect her to do?
Missing magic each day, and not seeing the wonder, that's how the moon must feel.
Now, this is one of the biggest positive points for this movie. It's the music. Whether it be just the regular score of the film, it just really matches with the classic model train TV show's music. I mean, it just really tightens that bond between the both of them, and it's honestly fun listening to them. And then also with the actual songs of the film, they're really great as well, because some of them are just so catchy and they're very, very whimsical, and like the movie's title explains, it's magical listening to them. Like from the Shining Time song to this song of I Know How the Moon Must Feel, and then to a later song that happens in the film which is He's a Really Useful Engine. These songs just fit into the movie so well, and as well as whenever they are incorporated with the scene, they really just match the feeling of what they're trying to express. Then, once again, we go back to the island of Sodor as we see a scene of Mr. Conductor scratching James' nose before he heads off to work, and as well as before Mr. Conductor leaves to go try to find a clue of how he can get his gold dust back by going to the windmill.
Oh, I'm sorry, James. I'm going to the windmill to search for something important. Now off you go to work, please.
Okay, Mr. C, keep your steam up.
What happened? Where's the windmill?
Okay, I swear, I did not cut the footage like that. That's just how it happens within the movie. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why did Mr. Conductor decide to go to the windmill on foot when he could have just asked one of the engines to take him there in the first place? Oh, but let me guess. We didn't have enough filler in this movie already, so we needed to have that scene. Now, obviously, since Mr. Conductor is really lost right now, take a guess. Just take a wild guess of what you think would happen to help him get out of this situation. Okay, you better be sitting. So a rabbit that we do not see leaves a note for Mr. Conductor, which for some reason the rabbit has really good penmanship, and he tells him that he left a couple of vegetables behind to help Mr. Conductor think better. So he first takes a bite out of a carrot, and that makes him shout out words that rhyme, and then he takes out another bite, which then he shouts out more words that rhyme, and then he takes a bite out of celery, which then just makes him shout out random words, until eventually he gets the hint that he needs.
Wait a minute. Beach. Beach! That's it! That's it!
So Mr. Conductor is able to find a flower phone, and he calls his cousin Junior, and he picks up on his own shell phone.
You have to help me find the source of all our family's gold dust.
What is the source?
That's the trouble, Junior. I haven't a clue.
And I've used up most of my gold dust too.
What? Then go to Shining Time Station first.
Do I need to say it again? We meet back up with Lily, who ends up going to Shining Time Station, and this is another thing that doesn't make sense to me. mean, look at this place. It's completely deserted. And they're trying to heavily imply that Mr. Conductor's importance of being at Shining Time Station automatically makes this place more busy. While at Shining Time Station, Lily meets up with Junior, who is finding Mr. Conductor's secret stash of gold dust. But eventually Casey Jones finds her, and she agrees to take her, or to meet up with her grandpa. And he just seems so excited to meet her.
Hello, Burnett.
Stacy.
Hello, Lily.
Hi, Grandpa. Well, have a good evening, Burnett.
Thanks, Stacy. Good night.
And we cut back to Mr. Conductor, who is moping around and having another nightmare sequence about his universe falling apart, and he's trying to figure out how he can find the windmill and what the source of his gold dust is, until he hears Thomas passing by.
Thomas, is that you?
Mr. Conductor! Mr. Conductor!
Thomas?
Oh, Mr. Conductor, where are you?
What are you doing? Just laying down there! Speak up! Stand up! He's not gonna see or hear you if you just do that, Mr. Conductor! So that night, Percy and Thomas are talking to each other, and they find out that there's a possible explanation of how Mr. Conductor gets to the island of Sodor, and it's possible through a set of magic buffers, but Diesel 10 is overhearing them, in which Toby also catches on that Diesel 10 heard what Percy and Thomas were talking about, so he goes off to try to get Diesel 10 out of their hair for a little bit. Now, Toby is able to find Diesel 10 at the scrapyard, and in order to distract him, he uses his bell, which then Diesel 10 overreacts, and he causes the whole shed that he and Splatter and Dodge are under to collapse. So for the time being, Diesel 10 is no longer going to bother them, but which then leads to another song sequence in this movie.
This really is the engine, you know. All the other engines, they'll tell you so.
Like I said before, the songs in this movie, just perfect. Of course, Thomas is on his way to do some odd jobs, and he finds that Henry is having trouble steaming again, and of course, luckily Thomas is on his way to pick up some trucks of special coal. But unfortunately, one of the trucks is not able to attach to the train, and ends up going through the magic buffers. Now, of course, we meet up back with Mr. Conductor, who is still moping around trying to find his way to the windmill, but Diesel 10 is finally able to catch up to him, and we get a pretty cool peril sequence, and it's with Diesel 10 hanging Mr. Conductor over a viaduct. Of course, I don't understand how Diesel 10 was able to get out from underneath the shed that he was trapped under, but anyway, he tells Mr. Conductor that he knows about the magic railway and the magic buffers that lead to it, so he's basically threatening Mr. Conductor to tell him where it is. But luckily, Mr. Conductor has his trusty rusty toolkit, which has a pair of pliers in it.
You got 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Okay, I can probably guess that Alec had a really bad time when having to be a part of this movie, but say what you will about that, if it was intentional or not.
5, 4, 3, 2. Too late, Diesel.
Now, since Mr. Conductor was finally able to make it to the windmill, he's able to see the clue of what's going to help him get his gold dust back.
So meanwhile, back in the real world, Lily meets Patch for the first time, and she asks her grandpa if she could go to Shining Time Station with him. And of course, he takes her on a horseback ride, using his own horse.
Okay, if you take that sentence a little out of context, that just seems not right. Now, while at Shining Time Station, when Lily meets up with Junior again, and he decides to take her on this journey to go to the island of Sodor with him. Okay, Junior, I love you, man, but you gotta know that kidnapping is a crime, right?
You ready, Lily? Here are the buffers.
Now, they make it to the island of Sodor, and they see that Thomas is heading down the line, and they decide to hitch a ride on him. And we learn a pretty funny backstory between Junior and Thomas.
Thomas! Now, don't look so surprised. I know you haven't seen me since...
You stuffed party poppers down my funnel.
Hey, we had a laugh.
You did.
So both Lily and Junior get inside Thomas, and then they drive down along the line until eventually they reach the windmill and find Mr. Conductor, in which he tells them that he was able to find the first part of the clue for the source of the gold dust.
Stoke up the magic in the mountain.
Dither.
Now, Junior gets the bright idea to grab one of the pedals of the windmill and then just ride it around. And of course, Mr. Conductor is telling him to get down, but the wind picks up more and it keeps spinning around until it flings Junior, and somehow he manages to land right on top of Diesel 10. Yeah, they don't call this movie Thomas and the Magic Railroad for nothing. There are a lot of magical coincidences in this movie. Now, later that evening, Lily is starting to get worried because she promised her grandpa that she would be back home before sunset. And of course, Mr. Conductor tells Thomas to help Lily take her back to the real world.
I promise I'll get you home to your grandpa, Lily.
Follow me, partner.
Whoa!
Right this way to Bufferville. Just a walk in the park.
You going through, Lily?
You're on your own from here on in, little blue buckaroo.
Wait a minute. Did that tumbleweed just talk? Quick, somebody catch that thing and see if Keanu Reeves is in it. Now, as they're going through the Magic Railroad, they're able to spot the truck that had all the special coal in it, and they remember the clue, the first part of the clue that Mr. Conductor told them about stoking up the magic, and that's what you do with coal, you stoke it up. So they grab the coal, and they're able to make it to the human world, which is a rather odd thing now to see, just Thomas existing within real-life society and not the model train world. Oh boy, here comes the point in the review where I go on this giant long rant and explain a big problem I have with the certain movie I'm watching. Because here's the thing. Thomas the Tank Engine is supposed to be a series that is timeless. And the fact that it's supposed to make you believe that this world of Thomas the Tank Engine is something that could exist in real life. But when you introduce the concept of magic and show that there are two different worlds, the Thomas the Tank Engine universe and the real world, it immediately splits that connection and kind of breaks the heart of children, or knowing that their real characters are people you have to go through, of having to go through this magic railway in order to see them. And it has been pretty obvious that trying to keep track of the two plots that are happening within this movie is mind-boggling, and it's really confusing, and especially for a child watching a movie. And if it's confusing for me, you can imagine how insane it must be for a child. Because they're going to tune out all the human stuff that's happening in the movie and only focus on the Thomas aspects, because that's the whole point of what they wanted to watch this movie. They wanted to see Thomas the Tank Engine. it just makes me think that these filmmakers had two stories in mind, and they could have gone either way with it, but instead they decided to just hodgepodge them together to make this film. Because with option A, you could have made a Hallmark Channel's kind of movie, where it was been focused on our main human characters and Shining Time Station, and completely ignore anything having to do with Thomas the Tank Engine, and have it focused be around Lily and her grandpa, and have it still be focused around Lady, and maybe it's just having to be that they're trying to repair her so they can help her run again, and because that's something that Burnett, the grandfather, just holds very dear to his heart. But instead, or you could have focused on the B story, or being about Thomas the Tank Engine, and have it be them trying to find a lost engine who is really important to their world, and ignore anything that has to do with the humans, but still have, like, Mr. Conductor and Junior in this movie, because they're honestly the two main important characters that really matter in the Thomas the Tank Engine part of the story. Or maybe even have more, like, conductor-like characters. Have it be that each conductor is a part of each team, and, like, let's say Junior was Thomas's conductor, and then Mr. Conductor was, like, the main leader out of all of them. It would have made a much far interesting story, and it would have been less confusing, and then have Diesel 10 be the main antagonist. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that I think these filmmakers were just too invested with the idea of trying to incorporate Shining Time Station with a Thomas the Tank Engine movie, because since the Shining Time Station TV show was a way to tell the Thomas the Tank Engine stories, and they didn't consider the fact that nobody is going to remember Shining Time Station unless they watched it as a kid, when you could have instead made a more centric Thomas the Tank Engine movie and just still have human characters within them, especially with people like Mr. Conductor and Junior. Or you could have gone with the more human Hallmark movie kind of story, with it being focused around Burnett, Lily, and Lady, except that Lady just wouldn't have a face later on in the movie. So Lily finally makes it back to her grandfather's workshop, and she tells them about the special coal they brought, and that it could be the possible way to reignite Lady and help her run again. And meanwhile, back in the Thomas the Tank Engine universe, we meet back up with Junior, who is still on top of Diesel 10, as they're running through the scrapyard. Until at last, they come a stop at the smelter shed, and Junior gets flung off of Diesel 10 and lands right on top of James. And Junior has finally run out of his own gold dust. So in order for both James and Junior to get out of this situation of Diesel 10 basically pushing them to a fiery grave, Junior has to use the last of his gold dust that he originally promised to give Lily.
Are you ready?
No, we're not.
James the Brains, get us out of here.
Look, James, I know you're in a tight spot right now, but falling off the edge is not your only option. Of course, what actually happens is that Junior is able to use some of Lily's gold dust to teleport back to Mr. Conductor along with James. And meanwhile, back in the real human world, Burnett is using the special coal, and they finally are able to start up Lady again, in which they're able to reignite the Magic Railroad.
So Lady, Thomas, Lily, Burnett, Patch, and Mutt are able to make it to the island of Sodor.
But Diesel 10 is able to finally find Lady, right? And it kicks off the best sequence within this movie.
Big Cheese hungry!
Get back!
Come on, lady. Coming, puffball!
This chase scene is the one thing you will definitely remember from this movie. But it just makes me even more angry because they had the aspects to make a really good Thomas the Tank Engine movie. Or because you could have had more stuff like this, or even the peril sequence on top of the viaduct with Mr. Conductor. But they just didn't go for it, and it's really such a shame. Because they had the ideas to do a really good Thomas movie, but they just didn't go for it.
Well done, Thomas! Well done!
You know, I'm actually really surprised. We've gone so far into this movie, and it's almost over, and I have not done the explosion joke yet. You know, maybe this is the first review where I won't do that joke.
Puffball! Teapot! Tin Kettle!
Yeah, you guys should know me better. I would not pass off on an explosion joke. So Diesel 10 is finally able to get his comeuppance, and everybody is able to finally decipher the rest of the clue.
Then watch the swirls that spin so well.
Swirls! Just like all the wonderful shavings around Lady when we were on the railroad.
By using the swirls that Lady was creating while she was on the Magic Railroad, as well as combining them with water to then create the gold dust. So it really seems like a really good happy ending, right? With Willie being more connected with her grandpa, and as Junior promised, he gave her a little bit of the gold dust that he had, and they share it together with the bluebird that Lily had. And Junior finally goes through his own character change and finally decides he should quit being lazy and decide to start working on a railway.
You know, Junior, there is a railroad.
With palm trees?
One or two.
And sunshine?
Sunny spells.
I'll take it. What's the way?
This is the way.
Wait a minute. Is that kid wearing my denim jacket? Oh my gosh, okay, forget everything bad I said about this movie. This is automatically the greatest movie of all time. Yeah, the Denim Jacket Gang.
And so we've come to the happy end of our story. And it's time for all of us to go home. Just like Thomas.
It's not really a whimsical way to end this movie. It just seems more like Alec telling the parents, hey, sorry we had to make you sit through this entire movie because your children wanted to see it. So yeah, you can go now. And that was Thomas and the Magic Railroad. And in all honesty, it's a bad movie. Which can be pretty jarring to hear me say because a lot of the movies I reviewed on this channel are still really good and they hold up to this day. Now, there are a few of them that definitely have a lot of flaws in them and are just considered okay in my opinion. This is really the movie that is not worthwhile watching. And even if you are a Thomas the Tank Engine fan, because for example, with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, if you are not a Power Rangers fan, you are probably not going to like that movie. But if you are, it's a great experience to watch. But even if you are a Thomas the Tank Engine fan, this is still not a good movie. It creates the concept, it puts the concept of Thomas and takes away everything great about it. And really the only entertaining aspects of this movie are the music, Alec's performance, Junior's performance, as well as every other actual Thomas the Tank Engine character within this film. Other than that, I mean, the other actors are fine, but they're just unnecessary for the film. They have the aspects to make a great Thomas the Tank Engine movie, but they just didn't act on it. Instead, creating this boring, almost timeline confusing, because they introduced all these aspects of magic and stuff into this film when it's never been shown in the past with the TV show. Oh, and also creating a pretty dated kind of movie. Really, the only thing I can think of that could help you watch this movie all the way through is the nostalgia factor of having watched it as a kid. Other than that, I really recommend you would stay away. Right? Or just watch certain little clips of the movie. Right? Because I really had to make this review as entertaining as possible, just to hopefully kept you not as bored as I was when I watched this. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, whatever the heck you want to do, and maybe hit that little bell icon to get notified when the old school is back in session. But until then, the old school is out!